actually have for you today is real data that scientists have taken, that scientists have measured on lots of different things, such as average global temperature, levels of carbon dioxide, levels of methane gas. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this data ourselves. You're going to work in partners to look at this data. We're going to graph this data on large pieces of chart paper. And then we're going to come together and see if we can draw any conclusions and see if we can learn anything about global warming by looking at these graphs. Okay? Look, how you get your graph paper to invent about 2 or 3 rows in the grid so that you have room to mark your axes and room to label them. You also put a title. After you do it in pencil, then we let's make it
you don't have to start off at 0. Yeah, we know. 7, 9.5, 8.5,
and 9. Excellent.
A great start.
You want to go up to just 14.6 since we have one?
Say it again? Yeah. Gotcha. Okay, guys, go for it.
Should we draw in?
I don't know. Miss Bobek? Kilometer 6 weight.
How about this? It should be, no, it should be 1 on the left, 1 on the right. How about you? It looks so clear. Oh, wow. Okay, fine.
Look at global temperature. Look at this.
Well, I'm not sure because if it seems...
There's, for instance, power plants and oil and petroleum. That is greenhouse gas emissions. And since people are using them more and more, it just keeps on going up.
Just keeps on going up. So you're trying to make a connection between carbon dioxide levels and oil consumption. Well, that happens to be another one of our graphs. Maybe we should look at this one next. Who graphed the world oil consumption? All right, start us out.
The world it's how much is consumed by humans in the year from years 1950 to 2005.
From 1950 to 2005. Is anything else we want to notice? What does the shape of the graph look like? What's happened?
It's increased.
It's increased. So Jake was saying that the levels of carbon dioxide may be occurring partially because of humans' use of fossil fuels. Does anybody want to add anything onto that? What do we think? Shiva?
No, I just think that I agree with it because, it's like the oil is going up, and I can't really see what is the oil consumption being measured.
1,000,000 tons.
So
Yeah,
like
that's very important. That this is measured in 1,000,000 tons. Before we move on, I think if we're taking a look at what's happening in our other graphs, look at the other types of data that we've collected. We've measured global temperature, changes in the Arctic ice, and levels of methane. And this may be something new that we haven't discussed yet. Let's talk a little bit about global temperatures. Okay. Oh, this is interesting. So it wasn't consistently increasing. So there were some years when the global temperature went down. This is really interesting because, let's see. I'm not sure if any of the other graphs show it as well as global temperature does. So if it's overall increasing, there's some years when it went down. Can we make sense of that? What do you think that means, Ben?
Ice level went up.
Ooh, say that again?
Whenever the global temperature went down, the Arctic ice level, the Arctic ice level went up.
So there may be a connection between these two graphs, between the average global temperature and how much the size of the Arctic ice area was changing. That's really interesting. Good point, right? Okay, and let's talk about methane for a minute. Ian, carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere and world oil consumption. Let's talk about how carbon dioxide gets into the atmosphere in the first place. What have we been learning about? Jake?
We've been learning about the carbon cycle and the nitrogen cycle.
Okay, yeah, we've been talking a lot about cycles. And the carbon cycle is a natural process, right? We talked a lot about photosynthesis and respiration, and we talked about how carbon enters and leaves our atmosphere as a result of this process. Now, humans come into this cycle a little bit also, and humans contribute to some of the carbon dioxide that's being produced in our atmosphere of CO2. Okay, so what I'd like to do is think about this as a sort of triangle. And a sort of triangle with these three elements that talks about an environmental issue or an environmental problem. Allegra? Global warming. And we can use this way of looking at the environment to study lots of different things too. For example, let's get a new color. Blue. We could choose a different natural factor, a human factor. The process that's created, and talk about our environmental problem. We go on to study global warming, we're going to look in more detail at the natural factors and the human factors. And one of the things that we'll be doing is looking at how we, in particular, each of us, and me, are contributing to the human factors, the combustion of fossil fuels. In particular, you're going to be looking